Hi everyone, welcome back to Difference Frames the World, the channel that offers a unique perspective on global affairs and how they shape the balance of power. Today, we're diving into one of the most important and, frankly, dangerous topics in the so-called G2 relations, China's four red lines, the non-negotiable boundaries that Beijing says the United States must never cross. These lines define the outer limits of what China sees as tolerable behavior in its relationship with Washington. Crossing them could mean anything from diplomatic retaliation to economic punishment, or even military confrontation. So, what exactly are these four red lines? And why are they so important right now? Let us look into the details. In recent months, Chinese officials have begun discussing these four red lines, boundaries the U.S. should respect if it wants a stable relationship with Beijing. According to Chinese state media and high-level statements, including those from the Chinese foreign minister and the ambassador to the United States, these four red lines are as follows. Number 1 is the Taiwan Question. The U.S. must not support Taiwan's independence or challenge China's sovereignty. Number 2 is China's path and system. The U.S. should have no interference in China's political system, ideology, or governance. Number 3 is China's right to development. The U.S. must not try to contain or hinder China's economic or technological progress. Number 4 is the so-called democracy and human rights. The U.S. must not weaponize human rights or democracy to pressure China internally. Let's examine these one by one, using real historical examples that illustrate what happens when Washington gets too close to the line. Let's start with the first and the most explosive red line, Taiwan, the line of fire. For Beijing, Taiwan isn't just a territorial issue, it's the core of China's sovereignty and national identity. Any U.S. move that appears to support Taiwan's independence, such as arms sales, political visits, or military patrols, immediately triggers a fierce response from Beijing. In late 2024, a U.S. Navy patrol aircraft flew through the Taiwan Strait. Beijing accused Washington of public hype and sent naval and air forces to shadow the U.S. plane. China accused the U.S. of undermining its sovereignty, a textbook example of how sensitive this issue is. Every time Washington emphasizes its commitment to Taiwan's defense, Beijing hears something very different, an attempt to split China and challenge its territorial integrity. In August 2022, then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a high-profile visit to Taiwan, becoming the most senior American official to do so in 25 years. Her trip, though brief, sent shockwaves through Beijing and the broader international community. Pelosi described her visit as a demonstration of support for Taiwan's democracy, stating that the United States stands with Taiwan. However, Beijing saw it very differently, as a serious violation of China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and a direct challenge to its One China principle, which considers Taiwan an inalienable part of its territory. China's response was swift and forceful. The People's Liberation Army launched massive military exercises surrounding Taiwan, effectively simulating a blockade. Dozens of Chinese warplanes crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait, erasing the informal buffer that had helped maintain peace for decades. Beijing also suspended dialogue with the U.S. on key issues, including climate change and military coordination, and imposed sanctions on Pelosi and her family. Beyond the immediate show of strength, the incident marked a turning point in the relations between Beijing and Washington. China asserts that Pelosi's visit crossed a major red line, the Taiwan Question. It reinforced China's belief that Washington was undermining its One China policy by deepening political and military ties with Taipei. Pelosi's trip symbolized the deep mistrust that defines modern relations between the two countries. It pushed cross-strait tensions to their highest point in decades, and the Chinese Army's military drills that followed effectively created a new normal, where Chinese jets and ships routinely operate much closer to Taiwan, keeping the region on edge ever since. That's why the Taiwan issue isn't just a diplomatic disagreement, it's the red line most likely to spark a real conflict. As we said in a video published in August 2022 about Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, Beijing should sincerely thank the old lady for providing an excuse to accelerate its unification with the island. The second red line is about China's path and system, in other words, its governance model. Beijing insists that the US must not interfere in China's political system or ideology, whether through funding non-governmental organizations, supporting activists, or promoting Western-style democracy. We witnessed this play out during the 2019 Hong Kong protests. When millions took to the streets, the U.S. Congress passed the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, threatening sanctions on Chinese and Hong Kong officials. Washington believed it was standing for democracy and freedom. To Beijing, however, it was a direct attack on China's internal affairs. China responded harshly, suspending U.S. naval visits to Hong Kong, sanctioning several American NGOs, and denouncing the U.S. for trying to contain China's rise through chaos. That moment was a perfect illustration of this red line. From Beijing's perspective, no foreign country has the right to dictate what kind of political system China should have. As Chinese diplomats often say, China's path is chosen by its people, not imposed from abroad. Now let's discuss the third red line, China's right to development. For Beijing, this is about sovereignty in the economic sense, the right to grow, innovate, and modernize without being strangled by U.S. containment. Over the past few years, Washington has tightened export controls on Chinese access to advanced semiconductors and artificial intelligence technology. In 2024, the Biden administration expanded bans on chip-making tools, claiming national security risks. China referred to those moves as technological containment and economic bullying. In response, Beijing struck back, imposing export restrictions on gallium, germanium, and antimony, key minerals used in electronics manufacturing. The U.S. attempted to slow China's technological progress. China retaliated by leveraging its control over strategic materials. That's how this red line plays out. Beijing is saying, you can compete, but you can't choke our development. And there's something deeper here. For China's leaders, development is not just about economics, it is also about legitimacy. The Communist Party's promise of prosperity is the foundation of its rule, as fewer people in China believe in the communism as before. So, any foreign attempt to block China's growth is not just competition, it is an existential threat. The fourth red line might sound abstract, but it's central to how China views the West's criticism of its domestic policies. China says the U.S. must stop using human rights and democracy as tools to interfere in its internal affairs, whether it's over Xinjiang, Tibet, or freedom of speech. From Beijing's view, Washington often uses human rights as a weapon to justify pressure or sanctions. And that ties directly to the earlier example of Hong Kong, or even U.S. statements about China's treatment of minorities in Xinjiang. In other words, Beijing believes values-based diplomacy is just another form of containment, dressed up as moral concern. The message is clear: we have our system, you have yours. Don't impose yours on us. The so-called democracy in the U.S. is a joke in itself, and millions of homeless Americans do not think they have better human rights on the American streets than the Chinese, all of whom are living in their apartments and houses. So why is China emphasizing these red lines now, in 2025? Because the two countries' relationship is at its most fragile point in years. Although the meeting between Xi Jinping and Trump showed some signs of a ceasefire, the competition between the two largest powers in the world remains tense. Military encounters around Taiwan and the South China Sea are on the rise. And both countries are locked in a global tech race that feels like a new Cold War. By publicly laying out these red lines, Beijing is drawing boundaries to warn the U.S. that escalation will have consequences. Crossing a red line doesn't necessarily mean war. Still, it does mean China will retaliate, often forcefully, such as through military responses around Taiwan, economic retaliation against tech bans, and diplomatic pushback when the U.S. speaks out on human rights. The danger is that the lines themselves are sometimes vague. What exactly counts as supporting Taiwan independence? What qualifies as hindering development? That ambiguity leaves plenty of room for miscalculation, and history shows both sides have pushed those limits more than once. In the end, these red lines aren't just about China's dignity, as they are also about how Beijing envisions a multipolar world where Western dominance no longer defines the rules. China's leaders want to be treated as equals, not as a project to be reformed. Their message to Washington is simple. You don't have to like our system, but you must respect it. And that's the core of this new era of competition. It's not just about trade, or technology, political systems, or even Taiwan and the South China Sea. It's about whose vision of world order will prevail. China's voice is louder than ever, and the Chinese are more confident than they have been before.